Ever get the feeling that some ancient mysteries are just beckoning us? Like they're whispering across time saying, hey, come take a closer look.
You mean like those unsolved cases that just keep drawing you back in? The ones with missing pieces and tantalizing clues?
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into one of those. Well, not a crime scene exactly, but something equally fascinating. Ancient Egypt and a legend that's captivated people for centuries.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the mystery?
It's the story of the Colossi of Memnon. These colossal statues, they stand on the west bank of Luxor, right in front of what's left of the mortuary temple of Amenhotep III.
Ah, I'm in Hotep III. Now there's a pharaoh who knew how to make a statement.
You know it.
Yeah.
And even in ruins, his temple complex and those statues are just awe-inspiring. You get a real sense of scale, of the grandeur of ancient Egypt.
Right, you can practically feel the weight of history when you stand there.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, try to imagine yourself transported back in time, standing on that ancient plain, the sun beating down, and before you rise these immense statues, silent sentinels from a lost world.
I bet it would be breathtaking.
It would be. But here's where it gets even more interesting. These statues, they're not just connected to Amenhotep III, they're also linked to a Greek mythological hero, Memnon.
Memnon, now that's a curveball. What does a pharaoh have to do with a Greek hero?
That's part of the mystery we're going to unravel today. Why this connection to Memnon, a warrior from the Trojan War.
And what's this I hear about these statues singing?
Ah, yes. The most intriguing part of it all, the legend says these colossal figures, they actually sang at dawn.
A singing statue. Sounds like something straight out of a myth.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
What?
But we have accounts from ancient historians, travelers who claim to have heard it themselves.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. Let's put on our detective hats and investigate this. Where do we start?
Well, first, let's examine the the statues themselves. The Colossi of Memnon.
Right. Let's get a good look at these silent witnesses.
These twin statues, they depict Pharaoh Amenhotep III. They were erected around 1350 BC, right smack in the middle of a golden age of Egyptian art.
So we're talking about a time of incredible artistic innovation and prosperity, and these statues were probably a real showcase of their skill.
Oh, absolutely. And when we say colossal, we mean it. Each statue stands at an impressive 18 meters. That's like, what, 60 feet tall? Even with the erosion they've suffered over time.
60 feet? That's taller than a 5-story building.
It is, and each one weighs a staggering 720 tons. Just imagine the logistics of moving those massive blocks of stone.
The sheer manpower involved would have been incredible.
You know it.
Yeah.
And originally they would have towered even higher. Estimates suggest they were closer to 21 meters when they were first built.
Wow, that's even more imposing. So how are they positioned?
They are seated, hands resting on their knees, their gaze fixed eastward towards the Nile and the rising sun. A very deliberate pose, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. Everything in ancient Egyptian art was symbolic. So facing east towards the sunrise, that probably connects to ideas of rebirth, renewal, maybe even the pharaoh's own divine power.
You're spot on. And speaking of symbolism, it's not just Amenhotep III represented there. There are smaller figures carved alongside him. His wife, Queen Tai, and his mother, Mutamwia. There was even a depiction of a daughter, but sadly, most of that is gone now.
Interesting. So not just a display of power, but also family ties, emphasizing lineage and perhaps legitimizing his rule. It's a common theme in dynastic art, showing the continuity of power through generations.
Precisely. And these statues, they weren't carved from just any old rock. It's quartzite sandstone. Though even the source of the stone is a bit of a debate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where things get a little murky. The hieroglyphs on the statues themselves claim they were quarried at El Gabal El Amar near Heliopolis, but geological analysis suggests a different origin, maybe somewhere closer to S1.
Like Gibel Gulab or Gebel Tingar.
Exactly. So we've got a bit of a discrepancy. Was there a symbolic reason for claiming the stone came from a specific location? Or were there perhaps logistical factors at play? It's a question for us to ponder.
And it's not just the scale and the figures that are important. There are inscriptions and carvings all over these colossi, tiny details that might be easily overlooked, but hold real significance.
Oh, those details are crucial, like the hieroglyphs, for example. They wouldn't just be random scribbles. They'd probably detail Amenhotep's titles, his accomplishments, pronouncements about his reign, all reinforcing his status, really hammering home the message of his divine right to rule.
And what about those images of the Nile god? Happy.
Oh, happy. That's a big clue. He's all about abundance, the life-giving power of the Nile. And his presence here probably symbolizes the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. It's a visual representation of the pharaoh's control over the entire kingdom.
It all adds up, doesn't it? The statues, the inscriptions, the imagery, they're all part of a larger narrative.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, these statues weren't just standing out there in isolation. They were the grand entrance to something even more spectacular.
Amenhotep's mortuary temple, right?
Yes, it was absolutely massive, stretching over 600 meters long and 100 meters wide. That's like several football fields put together. Imagine a complex filled with colossal statues, towering pylons, courtyards, halls, sanctuaries, all dedicated to the pharaoh's cult, his journey into the afterlife.
It must have been an incredible sight.
Oh, it would have been. A true testament to the wealth and power of ancient Egypt. And although much of it is lost now due to earthquakes, the Nile's floods, and just the passage of time, archaeologists are still uncovering fragments of its former glory.
It's like piecing together a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. But there's one event in particular, a significant event, that really sets the stage for the next chapter in our investigation. The earthquake of 27 BC.
The one that damaged the northern Colossus, right?
That's the one. It caused major cracks, especially in the upper section. And after that, something strange started to happen, something that really caught people's attention.
You mean the singing?
Exactly. The lower part of that damaged statue, it began to make sounds specifically at dawn.
Now that's just bizarre. A statue that sings, what did people make of it?
Well, imagine living back then and witnessing that. It would have been awe-inspiring, maybe even a little terrifying. Some might have seen it as a sign, a message from the gods.
And we're not just talking about rumors here, right? We have actual accounts from respected figures who claim to have heard this.
Oh, yeah. Strabo, the geographer, he visited the site around 20 BC, and he described hearing a sound like a sharp blow.
And Pausanias, another writer, he compared it to the sound of a lyre string snapping.
Pretty specific descriptions, wouldn't you say?
Mhm.
And it wasn't just them. Pliny the Elder, Tacitus, even Juvenal, they all mentioned these mysterious sounds. It was a phenomenon that people were talking about across the Roman Empire.
And here's the real clincher for me. The inscriptions left on the statues themselves.
The tourist graffiti.
Exactly. There are over 100 inscriptions in Greek and Latin from people who visited the Colossi. And many of them specifically mention whether they heard the sound or not.
It's like an ancient TripAdvisor review. Heard the statue sing, 5 stars. Would visit again.
It really is. But seriously, all those inscriptions, they really solidify this as a genuine phenomenon that captivated people. So what do you make of it all? What could have caused this singing?
Well, the most likely explanation, the one that makes the most sense scientifically, has to do with the way the statue was damaged. Those cracks created by the earthquake, they would have allowed dew to seep into the porous sandstone.
And then, as the sun rose each morning and warmed the statue,
The trapped moisture would evaporate, causing pressure to build up inside the stone, and that pressure, suddenly released, could have created those audible sounds.
it's a pretty elegant solution, isn't it? Just a natural process amplified by the earthquake damage.
It is. But of course, some people have suggested there might have been some human intervention involved. Maybe a hidden mechanism designed to create the sound.
Like some ancient sound engineering trick.
Something like that. But honestly, there's no real evidence to support that theory. And the fact that the sounds completely stopped after the Romans repaired the statue around 199 AD, that lends more weight to the natural explanation.
Right, Septimius Severus, the emperor who ordered the repairs, he apparently never heard the sound himself. And they used a different type of sandstone for the reconstruction.
Yeah, so they might have inadvertently silenced the singing colossus with their well-intentioned repairs.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How a natural event, combined with human intervention, could create such a captivating mystery. But this brings us to another question, the connection to Memnon. How did this singing statue become linked to a Greek hero?
This is where things get really intriguing, where culture and mythology intertwine with history and natural phenomena. The Greeks and Romans who visited the site, they heard those dawn sounds and immediately made a connection to their own stories.
They couldn't resist interpreting it through their own cultural lens, could they?
Not at all. And for them, the obvious choice was Memnon, a hero from the Trojan War, the son of Eos, the goddess of dawn.
Now, for our listeners who might not be as familiar with Greek mythology, can you give us the Spark Notes version of Memnon's story?
Sure. So Memnon was this valiant Ethiopian king who fought on the Trojan side of the war. He was a formidable warrior, but tragically he was killed by Achilles. And his mother, Eos, the goddess of dawn, she was so heartbroken that her tears became the morning dew.
So the connection starts to become clear, doesn't it? The Colossus facing east towards the dawn, the weeping or singing sounds at daybreak, the association of Ethiopia with that part of the world, it all fits together rather neatly.
Exactly. The Greeks essentially saw the statue's daily lament as a reflection of Eos's eternal mourning for her son. It was a perfect mythological explanation for a mysterious phenomenon. And even the name they gave to the Theban necropolis, Memnonium, it likely came from this very association.
And it wasn't just a passing association, was it? The Roman tourists who visited the site, they really embraced this connection.
Oh yeah, big time. They inscribed messages to Memnon directly on the statue, expressing their hopes of hearing his voice, their joy or disappointment at the experience. It became a kind of pilgrimage site for them.
It's amazing how these statues, originally symbols of Egyptian power, were transformed through a Greek myth, all because of a strange sound they made. And that connection has lingered, hasn't it? Even in modern times.
Absolutely. Even in the 19th century, you had explorers like Giovanni Belzoni referring to a statue of Ramses II as the young Memnon. The association had become so ingrained in the Western understanding of the site.
It just goes to show the lasting power of these stories, how they can shape our perception of the world. So, for you, our listener, let's take a step back and look at all the evidence. We have the colossi themselves, the historical accounts, the scientific explanation for the sounds, and the compelling mythological connection. What do you think it all means?
Well, it's a fascinating case, isn't it? We have plenty of anecdotal evidence for the singing, descriptions from people who were actually there, and the geological explanation, it makes perfect sense, but we don't have any definitive proof, like a recording of the sound itself. So there's still that element of mystery.
It's almost more intriguing that way, isn't it? And think about the impact this legend had. Even Roman emperors made the journey to see and hear this so-called Oracle of the Dawn.
That speaks volumes about the power of belief. It wasn't just a local legend, it captured the imagination of people across the Roman world. And Septimius Severus, repairing the statue, was he trying to appease the oracle or silence it? It makes you wonder.
It really does. And ultimately, it's a story that brings together so many different elements. Ancient Egyptian power and ambition, a dramatic geological event, a captivating Greek myth woven into it all, and the enduring fascination of the Roman world. Even after the sound ceased, the legend lived on.
That's the power of a good story, isn't it? It captures something essential about our relationship with the world, with the past, with the unknown. We try to make sense of the things we don't understand, and sometimes those explanations become legends that endure for centuries.
So for our listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this thought. What does this story, this convergence of Egyptian monument and Greek legend, tell us about how different cultures interacted with and interpreted the world around them? How can a natural event, something unusual but explainable, become the source of a myth that resonates for thousands of years? It's a reminder that the most enduring stories are often those that blend reality and imagination, history and myth. And if you're interested in exploring further, we encourage you to delve deeper into the reign of Amenhotep III, the wonders of the Theban necropolis, and the fascinating connections between Egyptian history and Greek mythology. There's a whole world waiting to be discovered.
Happy exploring.
Until next time.